going to talk about using proportions to solve word problems. And we're actually going to do a bunch of word problems in this unit, but we're going to start with some more basic ones, and we're just going to be comparing two different types of things and using word problems with proportions to help us solve them. So the first thing we want to do is just remember some vocabulary. So the first thing is a ratio. A ratio is a comparison of two numbers by division. It's basically just one fraction, right? You have a numerator, denominator with like the division in the middle. A proportion is an equation stating that two ratios are equal. So it's one fraction equal to another fraction. And to solve these word problems, we're going to be using proportions. So we're going to have two fractions. Okay, so let's read the first example together. A person who weighs 200 pounds on Earth would weigh about 32 pounds on the moon. Find the weight of a person on Earth who would weigh 15 pounds, on the moon. Okay, so let's write a word ratio. Think about what you're comparing here. So our word ratio, we're going to be comparing a person's weight on the Earth with the person's weight on the moon. So here's our fraction. We're going to put weight on Earth over weight on the moon. And then we can fill in our missing pieces. Okay, so we know that the first person weighs 200 pounds on Earth, so we'd put 200 on the top of our fraction, right? And they weigh 32 pounds on the moon. The other part that we know is that another person on Earth weighs 15 pounds on the moon, so we have 15 that we're going to put in the denominator because we're matching it up with the part that it goes with, right? It's talking about a weight on moon, so we're going to put that in the denominator. Right, and we're trying to figure out the weight of the person on the Earth, so we're going to put x on the top. And now, once we've set up that, we just have our proportion to solve, right? So we cross multiply. 32 times x gives us 32x. 200 times 15 is 3,000. Then from there, we're going to divide by 32 on both sides, and we get x is equal to 93.75. And remember, we always want to label our units when we're looking at proportions. So our units here are pounds, because everything was in pounds. And so this guy is going to weigh 93.75 pounds on the Earth. Okay, let's do another example. The ratio of acid to water in a mixture is 3:7. The mixture contains 10.5 milliliters of water. How much acid does the mixture contain? Okay. So the first thing we want to do is set up our word ratio for this problem. And so we're comparing the ratio of acid to water. So our word ratio, we're going to look at acid to water. Okay, so, and they tell us straight out, the mixture is 3:7. So our first fraction, 3 for acid, 7 for water. Okay, so 3/7. The next part of our information says the mixture contains 10.5 milliliters of water. So we're going to actually put that on the denominator of our second fraction because it's talking about water, not acid. And our water, we already decided, was going on the bottom of our fraction. So we're going to put 10.5 down there and then x on top. And then we're just going to cross multiply. 7 times x is 7x. 3 times 10.5 is 31.5. Then to get our x by itself, we're going to divide by 7 on both sides, and we get x is equal to 4.5, and it's going to be milliliters, because that's what we're talking about here. Okay, number 2. Mr. Hall drove 168 miles and used 6 gallons of gasoline. At this rate, how many gallons of gas will Mr. Hall use for a 588-mile trip? Okay, so the two things we're comparing here are miles and gallons. So that's what I wrote my word ratio as. Okay, you always have to write your word ratio. Always, always, always. Okay, so then we would put 168 miles on top, 6 gallons on the bottom, right? Because we're matching up numbers with words. The other number we have here is a 588-mile trip. So miles, we're going to put that on the top with their other miles. So, and we would put x on the bottom to figure out how many gallons we need. Now we're going to cross multiply. 168 times x is 168x. 6 times 588 is 3,528. And then we divide by 168 on both sides, and we get x is equal to 21. And our units here would be gallons, because that's what we were missing in our proportion. So 21 gallons. Number 3. The ratio of boys to girls in a science class is 2:3. There are 15 girls in the class. How many students are boys? Okay, so we're looking at boys to girls, right? And so that's our ratio, boys to girls. The boy to girl ratio is 2 to 3, so that's our first fraction. And then there are 15 girls in the class, so we're going to put 15 on the bottom. Okay? So we fill in x on the top for boys. When we cross multiply, we get 3x is equal to 30, which if we divide by 3 on both sides, gives us 10, and there are 10 boys in the class. Okay, so far all of these have been pretty straightforward. This next one is a little bit trickier. It looks almost exactly like the one we just did, except for this time, the ratio of boys to girls in a science class is 2 to 3. That's the same. There are 15 students in the class. Not boys, not girls, 15 total students. So how many are boys is our question. So let's look at our proportion that we set up over here, right? We set up boys to girls. If we tried to fill that in again, we could fill in the 2/3, but our 15 doesn't fit into that word ratio. It doesn't describe boys and it doesn't describe girls. It describes the total number in the class. So we have to write a different kind of ratio here. Here we're comparing students, the total number of students, to boys, because that's what we're trying to find. Okay, so we're going to look at our question. Our question says how many students are boys, so we need boys in our ratio. And the other thing we need is this total number of students. Okay, so we're looking at boys to total. Okay, so the first part now, we can't just put 2/3 in here, right? Because 2 describes the amount of boys, and 3 describes the amount of girls. So we can put the 2 on top. That part's still good. Okay, so we'll put a 2 here. But we can't put 3 on the bottom. What we're going to put is 5, right? Because if we think about this ratio, that's saying if we had 5 people, 2 of them would be boys and 3 of them would be girls. So if we think about just this ratio, our boys is still 2, but our total number would be 2 plus 3, which gives us 5. And then over on our other side, there's still 15 students total, so we'll put x over 15. And then we're going to cross multiply just like we were doing. So 5 times x is 5x, 2 times 15 is 30, divide by 5 on both sides, and we get x is equal to 6 boys. Okay, on the back of this, there are plenty for you to try on your own. There are 10. When you are done, you're going to get them checked, and then you can start on your homework. Please make sure when you're solving these, you include a word ratio, the proportion, and your units. You need all of those things. Okay, the word ratio really helps to make sure you're solving it correctly. If you need help, please ask.